So I'm Charles Battersby. I'm one of the founding members of a group called Press XY. We present panels and seminars on transgender themes in the video game industry. We've done about a dozen talks. Some of them are on transgender characters. Some of them are about being a transgender person working in the game industry. And some are about the kind of games and topics that tend to appeal to transgender players in the community. We also have a custom card game that uses the rules of Cards Against Humanity, but humorously addresses transgender themes. So there are far too many transgender characters in video games for me to list them all in an hour, let alone 10 minutes, and far too many games that have actually addressed gender change in some way. So for the next 9.5 minutes, I'll talk about some of the recurring ways that game designers have used transgender themes and transgender characters in the past, and I'll talk about how modern gamers can do things a little differently. So I'm sure most people here remember the mission in Final Fantasy VII, where Cloud Strife has to disguise himself as a woman so he can go rescue Tifa from a villain. Who knows that mission? Thank you. For those of you who don't know that mission, it's pretty much a standard Japanese RPG quest. Cloud, the hero, is told that he has to get 6 pieces of female clothing with a wig and perfume in order to go and disguise himself and rescue someone from the end boss. So it's a standard, go get the 6 whatevers, and then you can go on to the next stage of the quest. But it is also a use of the gender change for plot trope that we see quite often. So gender change for plot, well, Cloud Strife is not really a transgender character. He's a cisgender male, and due to a contrived situation, he is forced to disguise himself as a woman. And so this happens because, well, the designers thought it would be fun, they thought it would be funny, not because the character is actually transgender. So a lot of other games have done this, and so have also movies and books and plays dating back to the Renaissance and beyond. So this is done mostly because, well, it's because designers tend to think that it's funny to see a man dressed as a woman, that the man is degrading himself in some way, that it's also the implication that women are inferior to men. So when a character is forced to cross-dress for some outlandish reason, it's generally considered to be a funny joke. Now, there have been some very sensitive and some very good uses of this trope in movies like Some Like It Hot or in Tootsie. The people who wrote those projects, they really did make a lot of good jokes and clever observations. But there have also been some less sensitive versions of it. And there's also a subversion of this trope, which is the curse. This is when a character is forcibly changed from one gender to the other. This happens not just in games, but it happens in all forms of media. In games, it's happened for over 20 years. One of the earlier examples is an adventure game called Rex Nebular and the Cosmic Gender Bender. It used many of the negative examples, and frequently people have good intentions when they use the curse. They're trying to show the way that men and women react to each other, the differences between how men and women are expected to act in public, and it's often tried to use to decry sexism, to have a chauvinistic male character develop some sensitivity for women, and sometimes it shows women what it's like to be a man. It's also something that could be used to show what it's like to be a transgender person. Being forced into a body that you don't think is right is the kind of experience that many transgender people have before they've begun to transition. And this is something that I can't name any specific games that use that premise. So for all of you out there who do design games and might be interested in using a gender change in your story, it can be used to explore what it's like to be a transgender person rather than using it in the traditional battle of the sexes format. And now, as people who design worlds and create characters, it's up to us to determine what the rules of that world are. Are gender roles strictly enforced? Do people feel that they must disguise themselves to battle inequality? Does your game world inherently have an inequality between the sexes? And the great thing is, a lot of games don't. A lot of games let the player choose their gender at the beginning of the game, and it has minor or no consequences on gameplay. And for games like Mass Effect, for example, where you can choose between John Shepard or Jane Shepard, Your character will have slight differences in dialogue with some characters over the course of a 100-hour journey, but it's not integral. It doesn't really change the way that your character plays. And now the good news is that this sort of plot-based gender change is becoming very rare in modern games. It was common in the early 90s, the late 80s, and even the early 2000s. But nowadays we're starting to see more characters that are genuinely transgender. These are people who aren't forced, they aren't cursed, they aren't in disguise. They're people who genuinely identify as the gender that they're presenting. And some terrific examples of this from recent games are Krem from Dragon Age Inquisition. If anyone's played Dragon Age Inquisition. Thank you. The rest of you should all go play Dragon Age Inquisition. So Krem is a character, female to male, and Dragon Age is a fantasy world. So even though there is magic in this world, Krem has not chosen to magically change his body. And the player can get all the way through the game without actually knowing that Krem is transgender. You have to seek out Krem. He's one of the lieutenants in a band of mercenaries. His boss is one of the player's companions. So his boss will go on adventures with you, and you can have a lot of quests related to that. But if you want to know about Krem, you have to seek out Krem in the local pub and have long conversations choosing the right dialogue options. And if you say the wrong thing, Krem can get mad and offended. So it's not just an interesting bit of character, it's also a learning experience for the player. Now, another great example, a personal favorite of mine, is Kaine from a game called Nier. And no one's going to raise their hand when I say Nier, because it's always on the list of great cult games that no one ever plays. It came out about 2010. It's a free-roaming adventure RPG, and Kaine is one of the supporting characters. The wonderful thing about this is you can play all the way through Nier without knowing that Kaine is a transgender person. It's only by beating the game and starting a new game that you unlock additional dialogue options and narrative within the game. And Kaine's gender identity is just one of the themes that you can unlock when you go through the New Game Plus mode. So you can play through the game 2, 3, 4 times, each time getting slightly more in-depth detail of what the world is like. And that similar theme is used in a game called Catherine. One of the characters is named Erica. And Catherine is a game about male and female dynamics. It's about dating and relationships. And if you get through one of the unlockable endings, you'll learn that Erica is a post-op transsexual. And it doesn't affect the story. It's just one possible bit of information that players might discover. And I'm running low on time, so I'm going to blast through as much as I can. Now, even though we do have some genuinely transgender characters, sometimes they're used in a negative way. And actually, to transition back, I know I'm running out of time, but I'll point out that when it comes to unlockable endings and New Game Plus mode, those are things that only game designers can do. A novelist and a screenwriter might put in hints about a character's past, but it's only game designers that can have the hidden journal entry, the unlockable ending, or the optional conversation. So as people who make games, this is something only you can do. And now, to blast ahead, a couple of things that happens that aren't really desirable when designers use genuine transgender characters is the Norman Bates stereotype. We'll see a lot of negative tropes. There's a game called Resident Evil Code Veronica, where the first half of the game, the player fights 2 villains named Alfred and Alexia Ashford, and sure enough, it turns out halfway through, Alexia is just Alfred in a wig. And what this means, it's an implication that the designers probably didn't think about, but it's saying transgender people are mentally ill, and it's a specific kind of mental illness that's dangerous to other people. So if you're making a game that's going to use a transgender villain, just keep in mind that the Norman Bates psycho stereotype has been used a lot, and it may have implications you're not intending. And I will run quickly to my conclusion. Press XY has done dozens of panels. Everything I've said here is covered in videos and podcasts on pressxy.com. So if you're interested in hearing more, you can see all of this covered in extreme detail. If you'd like to hear me talking about other things, I'm doing panels on transgender comic book characters at FlameCom and Special Edition New York in June. And this weekend, I'll be doing panels on cosplay at the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens Cherry Blossom Festival. And of course, you can hear more about me at charlesbattersby.com. Thank you.